Hey guys, welcome back to more Entitled People stories. In this video, my corrupt landlord's so-called maintenance crew took apart my entire apartment and stole all of my items. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one is an a-hole tax story. My wife and I moved into a basement apartment. The family above us had 4 boys between ages 4 to 9. We actually enjoyed the occasional pitter-patter from the boys upstairs and their gleeful laughing. Yes, there was the occasional game night that ran late, but we didn't mind. I would constantly be sharing food with them, and they would occasionally send some cookies our way. The husband upstairs would constantly solicit my help with IT stuff because he is not a computer guy, like when their router died and I offered to just replace the routers with my own that I had in storage. And well, everything was great between us and them until it wasn't. It's important to note that the wife upstairs was the landlord's daughter, and it's also important to note in our rental contract that we were guaranteed in point blank, no uncertain terms, that we would get quiet enjoyment after 7 p.m. After a year passed, the noises upstairs started getting significantly louder. The pitter-patters turned into stomps, crashes and other loud bang noises. We noticed the parents were gone more often, leaving their 10-year-old kid in charge to babysit the other 3. Our own little baby kept waking up in a panic due to the loud bangs and crashes at all hours of the day and night. We tried diplomacy and asking to tone down the noise. The more we asked them to keep it down with the stomping after 7 p.m, the more the wife seemed to retaliate and be rude to us. We even offered to pay for a contractor to come in and soundproof the flooring on our dime. Their response was, "My daddy is the landlord, so he will always take my side. If you don't stop complaining, I will have my daddy kick you out." We had enough and decided to move. We sold them our barbecue grill since we wouldn't need it where we were going, and most importantly, sold them the routers that they needed. They never asked to take over the Wi-Fi account, which is great, because I'll occasionally just block devices from working. Your little Wi-Fi toaster is not working? Probably just a bad toaster. Your iPad is not connecting to the internet? Maybe you need to restart it. Nothing major like their work computers or TVs, because that is too noticeable and would be blamed on the Wi-Fi. Not the device itself either. If they ever ask for help with it, my standard rates are $100 per hour with an additional 50% a-hole tax. And yeah, ripe stars, if you enjoy these a-hole tax stories, please don't forget to let me know in the comments, and please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because we are getting closer and closer to 130,000 subscribers, which I cannot wait to reach. Thank you so much, and the next one is the title story, which is titled "Corrupt Criminal Maintenance Crew Cleaned Out My Entire Apartment Before I Moved Out." So as with most people my age, late 20s, I'd been living my last few years in a less than desirable apartment. Don't get me wrong, it was not awful, but I was certainly ready for a bit of an upgrade, and once I got a new job secured, that's exactly what I started setting out to do. After getting a good offer on a house, I started all the paperwork to move out of said apartment. I am a fairly meticulous guy. In a nerdy way, I love paperwork and all that boring stuff, so the formal side of the move was right up my alley. I obviously did everything perfectly right, submitting all the correct forms and documents right to my landlord on time. Speaking of my landlord though, I would be lying if I said he was not a bit dodgy. I had lived here for years and personally not had many major problems. But a lot of the other tenants will get one noise complaint and then suddenly their rent has gone up. Better yet, Steve, the landlord, waits until he knows that the housing market is awful to do this, knowing they won't be able to find another place. So he's not the best of guys, but I did not think that he would do what he did while I was moving, all for some last-minute profits. So when he's not doing botched maintenance jobs or cutting corners, Steve runs a small side hustle business called Clean Slate, which is a removal and maintenance company. Decently funny name if you ask me, but anyway, I've seen the crew in the hallway, sometimes kicking down someone's door for being a day late with rent, all that fun stuff. At other times they were just taking care of property maintenance. Let's just say they don't look like the type of people you want hanging around your neighborhood. I don't even know where Steve found them all, but it seems he was going for the people who were just barely avoiding prison. "Hello, Steve," I stated as I dropped by his office with paper copies of all the paperwork I'd sent over. "I'm just bringing by paper copies of the documents you requested." "Okay, just put them on the side," he scoffed. His rude behavior was not new to me, so I did as he asked and walked away, but I swore I heard him saying, "Fool for thinking it will be that easy, ha." At the time I thought I was just hearing things, but after what he did next, I'm sure my ears were being truthful. "Oh, and Mark," Steve called, "just to let you know, there will be a routine inspection, nothing to worry about." I did remember seeing that on one of the documents he had sent. It made sense to me, so I didn't think anything of it until later that day when I came home from work and the supposed inspection had taken place. Upon entering my apartment, it took me a minute to make sure it was actually mine, because from first glance I noticed that everything was gone. They literally cleaned it out, and when I say everything, I mean it. All my expensive gadgets and collectibles, my furniture, and even all of my personal items, the more sentimental ones too. To say that I was in shock is an understatement. I felt like crying as I looked at my empty shell of an apartment. All my life had been removed from it. I was just so confused. Walking inside, I saw there was some paper on the floor reading "Inspection Report" and detailing a bunch of damages I had apparently caused in the apartment and I had to pay for. I spent the next few hours going all over and finding said damages. Half of them did not exist, and I made sure to take photos of where they supposedly were. Some were already there when I moved in, and I knew I had photos from my initial moving day, so I was covered on that ground. And others were certainly new, as in the wall debris was still there, like it had been smashed that day. In my fury, I stormed down to Steve's office and said, "What on earth happened in my apartment?" "I have no idea what you're talking about," Steve sighed. "You said there was some inspection today, not that all my belongings were gonna be removed. What is this list of damages? Some of these don't even exist and others are so new, I'm convinced whoever did this inspection just did them." I ranted, waving the paper in his face that I might add was in handwriting and not a proper typed up document. He made a reach for the paper, but I snatched my hand back. I wanted it as proof if anything were to happen. He seemed to realize this with a squint of his eye. "Well, these damages have been added to your final bill, and you won't be getting your deposit back." I can tell you now that I will not be paying for these fabricated damages, but this still doesn't explain where all my belongings are. "You must be mistaken, maybe you moved your things a while ago?" Are you joking? I think I would remember if I moved 99% of my stuff somewhere else. I laughed, thinking I was in some sort of a dream. "Maybe there was a mix-up with the Clean Slate team. Whatever happened, it's not my fault." Steve shrugged and waved his hand at me to leave. "Not your fault? I can guarantee that it's probably your fault," I replied and waited for him to reply before giving up and walking out. I went straight back upstairs and began taking photos of everything and everywhere, more photos of where the supposed damages were, general images of having a lack of items, and close-ups of sockets where things had been plugged in had clearly just been yanked out without a care. I also screenshotted a bunch of online reviews of other random shady things Steve has done, and then I headed straight to the police. They were shocked at what I was showing them, especially the footage from my door cam, which is hidden as I knew Steve would have forced me to remove it, perfectly legal in my area, which shows the Clean Slate group entering and leaving my apartment many times with all my stuff. Better yet, Steve is in frame telling them what to do. There's also a shot of them going in with a hammer, proof that the few damages that are there were not even caused by me. I filed a report for grand theft, which the police advised. They then informed me that there was a pattern of similar reports already against Steve, but they never had enough evidence to do anything. However, thanks to my meticulous nature, they finally did. They told me they would be doing an investigation and get back to me. In the meantime, I stayed at my parents' place. A week later, the police called around and explained that the investigation had revealed much more than we would have thought. The company from Steve was being used as a way for him to avoid his taxes, as well as being used to sell stolen goods, most likely from tenants, and to top it all off, they have been done for illegal dumping of waste. Steve ended up getting arrested for all of this, his sentence lengthened by the numerous people who came forward and reported all sorts of other things. The main members of his Clean Slate company were also done for the thefts and other crimes. However, Steve got the worst sentence, as his was billed as the running of a criminal enterprise. Now, that's a title you cannot run away from. All this went down in court, so of course Steve left screaming that I was an idiot, fool, and the worst tenant he had ever had. Along with the prison time, Steve was ordered to give me access to his warehouse, where I found all of my stuff. There was not much left of other tenants from past times, as most had been sold, but what did remain was returned. Most of my possessions were there, and at least none of my sentimental items had been chucked yet. He was also forced to pay us all a big fine, a bigger one to those whose items were not recovered. Last I heard, this caused him to go completely bankrupt, and his life after prison is gonna be one hell of a bumpy ride. My new house is great, and the money did come in handy to get a nice new patio in the back. So it all worked out in the end, but I just figured I had to rant about this insane situation. Why are some landlords so hellbent on money? And yeah, Ripe Stars, if you ever had to deal with any crazy landlords, I would love to hear your story in the comments. And now we will continue with a brand new subreddit called Oh No, Consequences. And it does have indeed very juicy, satisfying stories. My late mother's boyfriend was, is, and always has been a creep. He's the kind of person that seems charming on the surface, but there's this vaguely ick feeling that lingers around him, especially if you are female. The creep thought he was super suave and loved to flirt with, aka harass women. He got away with it most of the time because he was a supervisor at his job and was buddy-buddy with most of the managers. Not to mention that he lived in a super small town that did not have many job opportunities. The women were scared to lose one of the few jobs available, so they just smiled awkwardly and took it. Well, the creep messed up. He was having a self-professed bad day at work and went to the break room to just cool off. The break room was occupied by two very young females. The creep told these girls that they should flash him to make him feel better, but the creep did not notice the other man in the room. This man apparently tore into creep and then immediately reported him to the manager, and the creep actually got fired on the spot for sexual harassment. And it doesn't end there. The creep went to his second job in an even worse mood. His manager obviously noticed and asked what is up. Creep, having absolutely no clue that he was not the wronged party, told his manager that he'd been fired and why. This manager also fired him. I cannot even express how delighted I was to hear that his actions finally caught up to him. Not that he'll ever learn. Last I heard, he was still whining that he was just joking and he did not deserve what he got. And the next one is another story from the same subreddit. This was not me, but my husband, but it's just so beautiful. So Jerkface comes down while my husband is working the front desk at a hotel. My husband is on the phone with another customer when this Jerkface starts smacking the counter and loudly yelling about how the free coffee has run out. My husband then politely points out that he's on the phone with a customer and will refill the coffee as soon as he is finished. This was not good enough for Jerkface, who loudly complains, swearing the whole time. Eventually, because hubby is still on the phone, he stomps off. Later the same day, he stomps out of the restaurant attached to the hotel, grumbling and complaining, and my husband calls out that the coffee is ready. He starts yelling at my husband about how it's too late now and comes up to the desk to vent his anger. He starts swearing at my husband, so my husband tells him to pack his stuff. He has 15 minutes to leave or the cops are called. Our hotel has a no-tolerance policy for direct verbal abuse to staff, and Jerkface does not start packing. Instead, he keeps swearing at my husband and threatening him, just as the general manager walks out of the office, who tells Jerkface to get out or he's calling the cops. GM also points out, while ending the man's week-long stay at the hotel, that he knows the man's boss by name and will be calling said boss to make sure that Jerkface never stays at our hotel again. And GM indeed calls the boss and has promised that Jerkface won't be coming there again. GM also sends the boss the video of Jerkface and his behavior, and an hour later gets a call that Jerkface is fired because that is not how this company behaves. Anyway, the next one is titled Neighbors' Kids Are a Real Problem. My grandparents owned the lot next to their house. They just used it for more yard space. But when my sister and I were born, Grandpa knocked down the old shed on the empty lot and built a playground for us. Everything was made with his own two hands. It was a kid's dream, and we both played there any chance we got. And after we grew up, they let the kids of their neighborhood use the place to play with no issues, but then some years later they passed and the house went to my mom. I found out I am expecting, so my husband Andre and I started seriously looking for a house when we had only been half trying before. Mom suggested we buy my grandparents' house since we know it's a good place, and us buying it would keep it in the family. It is still in good shape, has no HOA, and is close to a good school. So we bought it for a steal and moved in ASAP. Right away we noticed parents hanging out at the playground with their kids. We did not mind at first and used the chance to introduce ourselves. Everyone was lovely and younger than I had expected, but it seems a bunch of couples with kids had taken over the street in the past 5 or so years. The problem arose when neighbor witch NW brought her kid over one afternoon. I happened to be by the window and saw a flash of red outside. It was a kid in a red shirt literally standing on the roof of one of the 2-story playhouses, almost 10 feet off the ground. I ran outside thinking he was alone and said he needed to get down right now. That is when NW stormed over from who knows where and yelled at me to F off and not tell her kid anything. I asked if she was his mom, and after getting a yes, I asked her to make her son get down before he got hurt. She argued, saying I couldn't make them do anything, so I told her this was my property and yes, I could. That is when the kid fell, and thankfully once he was halfway down and only onto the grass, but he still wailed like he was dying. He was fine. He then got up without issues and ran over to NW. She picked him up and said if he had been hurt she would have sued me, so I threatened her with the cops if she didn't leave. She flipped me off and called me a gin jockey, random AF, I don't drink at all, let alone gin, but left. Andre was worried other people might try to sue us if their kids got hurt on our land. I had not even thought of that, so we put up a fence. Parents came by asking why the fence, so I told them why, and they can thank NW. I heard she has been shunned by the other parents and none of them will let their kids play with hers. I feel guilty that her son is getting punished for her actions. Maybe just saying we wanted a fence up instead of telling them about NW would have been kinder. So Reddit, am I the a-hole? And yeah, Ripe Stars, I would love to hear from you. Do you think that OP is the a-hole for this or not? Let us know in the comments. And someone in the audience said, not the a-hole, it's your right to protect yourself from harm. If any child gets hurt on your property, the parents can sue the pants off of you. Comment number 2, not the a-hole. You did what was necessary to protect your property from lawsuits and you told the truth about why you put up the fence. It's a shame that her child is getting shunned, but it is not the first time that a kid has suffered for the actions of an idiotic parent, and it won't be the last. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I would agree, better be safe than sorry and don't let random strangers on your property, especially if there is a good chance that they might get hurt. This one is titled, Issues with My Weird Neighbor. My husband, 29 male, and I, 28 female, have been living here for 5 years ever since we married. Our previous neighbors were an adorable couple in their 60s to 70s, we had a fairly good relationship and were kind of sad when they left. This year I gave birth to my son, 6-month-old now. When my new neighbors, let's call them Paul and Anna, moved in, I was 2 months pregnant. We were not friends, but we would say hi to each other here and there. I sunbathe every day, it's something I've been doing since childhood. I was a very anemic kid and my mom made me do it to help with my anemia. I don't even know if it works, but it's a habit that helps me start my day. That was not a problem until my pregnancy became apparent. The left side of the yard has 2 kinds of fences, one low, 1.5 meters, that used to have a hedge on the neighbor's side that they cut off, and one taller one, 2 meters, in the rest of the backyard. It's hard to see it from the ground, but they can still see our whole yard and part of our main floor from the 2nd floor. When I was 5 months pregnant, Paul told my husband that my sunbathing was making them uncomfortable. I sunbathed in shorts and tank tops, nothing out of the ordinary, I just ignored them and kept my routine. The following month, he did it again. Until I was 8 months pregnant, I was back from a walk with my husband and Anna was in the front of the house, and once she saw me, she stormed inside and slammed the door. The following day, Paul came to our house and told us that they have fertility problems and seeing me pregnant was making her heavily uncomfortable and I was an insensitive bitch. Currently, I am working from home and the baby is close to me in a playpen in the living room and we have another one in the backyard on the terrace, so I can have him close when gardening or just playing with him. Well, I made his wife uncomfortable again yesterday. I was in the living room playing with the baby when he knocked. He asked me to move from the living room because his wife could see me from their balcony. I told him to tell her to look in the other direction and leave me alone. Today, my husband and I were grilling some meat in the backyard. The baby was hungry, so I started to breastfeed. When I looked at their house, Anna was on the balcony. She went in and a few minutes later, Paul was at our door again. I gave my son to my husband and I answered the door. Paul went off on me for breastfeeding in public, again my fenced-in yard, and being inconsiderate. When he finished, I told him to leave us alone, don't knock on my door again, and if his wife is so upset over seeing a baby, she needs therapy and not him harassing my family. And I will do everything I want in my own home. At the time, I felt justified, but I was venting with my mom and she told me I was wrong. And that I could not understand because I never suffered from infertility and I need to apologize. So Reddit, am I the a-hole? And yeah, Ripe Stars, I would love to hear what you think about this story. Do you think that OP is the a-hole or not? Edit. I sat down with my husband to talk about the precautions. I was so annoyed that I was not thinking about the risks. We'll be installing cameras and a taller fence. Unfortunately, their vision from the balcony will stay the same because the city won't let us build taller than 4 meters. But this will help anyway. I called my dad to get some help with the fence and he ended up talking to my mom. She called and apologized. She suffered from infertility and postpartum depression. When I spoke to her, she felt Anna's pain, but she also remembered some crazy things she did during this period and gave me some extra precautions to take. About the restraining order, we called our lawyer and he told us to get few footages because until now we only have our word and our other neighbor's testimony. And if he shows up again to record it and to call the cops, if he came to my house 5 times to call the cops each time. But still will be hard to get one. And now some users in the comments said, not the a-hole, this is not your problem, it sucks for them, but are you really gonna stop being a mom at certain viewpoints because they cannot have a baby? She needs to stop looking at your home, that's it and that's all. Comment number 2, not the a-hole, document everything and fill a restraining order if this behavior continues. This is harassment, you are not being inconsiderate for living your life. The world does not stop spinning because this couple cannot have a baby. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I would agree, as sad as it is for the other couple, but they cannot dictate others what to do, especially when it is basic things like taking care of a baby. That's just ridiculous. And yeah guys, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. And also check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on Spotify, Amazon, Audible and other podcast platforms. You will often find exclusive episodes and early access to new content. Furthermore, please check out my Patreon by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or my YouTube membership program for even more exclusive stories. Thank you so much and I will see you again tomorrow.